to everyone present here today and those tuning in on Facebook Live event. My name is Russell and I'm an intern coach here at Marquette Sports Performance for the fall 2019 semester. And today my presentation is going to be on the Snowboard Half Pipe. So before I move any further, I'm going to talk about just some trick terminology that the athletes and casters use during the sport. So the first one's going to be front side versus the back side. So the front side is basically as the snowboarder leaves the ramp is where his body is rotating. If he's rotating towards his front, it's called a front side. If he's leaving the ramp rotating towards the back, that's called the back side. The next one's a cork. So basically a cork movement, if you think about roller coasters, the corkscrew. So that's basically what the athlete is doing leaving the ramp. So if he leaves the ramp, goes into that kind of rotation, it's called a cork. The next one's going to be a flip. This is pretty self-explanatory. So if the athlete leaves the ramp, if it's a forward or a backwards flip, it'll be categorized as a flip. And finally, rotations or spins. So usually they talk about this in numbers, so 360, 720, 1080, 1440, etc. This just talks to number of rotations the athletes go through. So just try and keep these in mind as we watch the next video. Try and keep up with the casters and what they have to say. Wow, it's not playing. It's playing, great.
Wow. Baranu is leading from Sean White. Sean White is about to drop in for his third and final run here in Korea. He has 2 gold medals already, a 4th in Sochi. He wasn't happy.
So currently he's sitting in second place behind Japan's Hirano, and he needs a good run at this in order to snatch the gold.
He has a problem. He's only in second place. Sean White has dropped in for gold.
Front side double cork 1440 for Sean. Are we going to see the back-to-back 1440s? Yes, we are. Back-to-back 1440s there for Sean White. The skyhook, the front side 540. Now into the double wing twist, the tomahawk. And he gets that around. Sean White now with a front side double cork 1260. And he puts it down. And Sean White with an incredible run there. I can't wait to see another angle there because the cable cam, you lose a little bit of the
So anyone want to try and take a guess at his final score? So he went into this round with a 94.25. He had to beat 95.25. Right.
96, 97.
It was.
I remember watching this.
Okay. So he came out with a 97.75, bagging him the Olympic record for highest score in this event, also bagging him his 3rd Olympic gold. So just again, as you've heard the casters talk about, so the first 2 tricks is what they call a front side double cork 1440. So front side, he rotated from his front side off the ramp, double cork, and then 1440, which is 4 full rotations. And then he went to a front side 540, which is a very simple off the ramp, front side 540, which is 1.5 rotations, into a double Mac twist. That's just a fancy name for 2 flips and 1260 rotation. And then finally, front side double cork 1260, which is very similar to the first one, just 3.5 rotations. So just some stats on the Snowboard Half Pipe. So it's born in the US 1960, it has since exploded into fame. So now the US's biggest competitors are from France, Sweden, Canada, Australia, and Japan. So some dimensions of the half pipe. I'm going to be speaking in the meters, so if anyone wants the feet numbers, are down below. So 170 meters long, 19 to 22 meters wide, 6.7 meters high with an average of 17 degrees of a slope. And a run, that's what they call like a full run, takes about 20-30 seconds from the entry ramp. They drop in all the way down to 170 meters, takes about 20-30 seconds. And on average, athletes perform 6 to 8 hits or 6 to 8 tricks. So Sean White did about 5, and they're allowed to do as many as they can as long as they utilize the entire half pipe. So judging and scoring. This sport is very similar to figure skating, as in it's very subjective, and these are just some of the criteria that they were judged upon. So first off, we have to look at how many judges there are. There's 6 judges total, and each of them scored a total of 100. And after all the scores that are collected, the lowest score and the highest score are taken away, the remaining 4 average to give an average score. So for Sean White to have a 97.75, that's nearly a perfect run. So some of the judging criteria. So amplitude is basically how high the athlete gets off the ramp. So keep in mind, it's already 22 feet high, or 6.7 meters. They usually go a lot higher off of the ramp. The next one's execution, so basically how beautiful the trick is, how cool they look, and as well as how complicated the trick is. Variety, you're looking at how many different types of tricks you're pulling together instead of doing the same one over and over again. Judges want to see a variety of different tricks. New tricks. So I believe in 2010, Shaun White pulled the first double McTwist. So because he pulled a new trick that it's never before seen, he got bonus points for that. And finally, a combination of tricks. So judges want to see combos of back-to-back big tricks. That's why we again saw the double frontside double 1440. So again, back-to-back big tricks scores you big points rather than like a big trick than a small trick. So now we're going to transition to talk more about the athlete. So this is again Shaun White, the face of the sport in the 2013 Winter X Games. So some considerations that we have to think about. Some of the forces they experience, so concentric forces from liftoff off the ramp, some isometric forces trying to stay on the board, stay in the tuck position from the flat part of the half pipe, all the way trying to fight the change of momentum going up the ramp, and finally eccentric forces from all the landing they experience. The next one, so snowboarders rely a lot on rotational ability, as you see, all the twisting they do. Four full rotations in the air is not easy to do. That places a lot of load on the spine because of all the twisting and contorting they need to do, as well as all the landing. They also have to utilize a big anaerobic component because, again, from the start of their run to the end, it's only about 20-30 seconds, so that's utilization of a big anaerobic component. And finally, something a lot of people neglect or forget to think about is an aerobic component. They're training in alpine regions where oxygen levels are low, as well as in some places they don't necessarily have lifts to go from bottom to top. So they have to do that 107 meter or 550 feet hike every time they complete a run. So again, practice sessions can be quite taxing on that. So again, this is my NO plan. It looks pretty busy, but I'm gonna try and just briefly explain about this. So first of all, we're gonna take a look at the competition phase. It starts somewhere in October, and this is like the first cup. Again, off season being all the way there as we transition to the in season. So the first competition is going to be in New Zealand, and this is for the Australia-New Zealand Cup. This is just one event. They compete, they qualify, they compete, they win, and then that's done and over with. Then we've got at least a 2-month break as we transition to the World Cup season. So it starts off in Copper Mountain in Colorado, and as you can see, it goes all around the world from China, Switzerland, back to the US, and then they finish off in Canada. So at every event, they have to qualify, compete, and rack up points. At the end of the season, the athlete with the most points wins the World Cup. And now we come back to the phases. Again, I have all the legends down here. So we move from the GPP, SPP, CPP into the taper. And again, the things I want to focus on as we move along. Putting some impact training because they're already facing some load in the mountains. I want to try and incorporate some unilateral, single leg stuff, just to get balance in the body. And finally, we just look at testing. So jump vertical testing and rotational testing is something I want to look at, just because it's a very major component of what these athletes have to use. So jump, also because I'm working with one athlete, logistics is not really a big issue, so I can afford to do multiple testing to get me a better graph. So jump vert testing, I want to try and do before every training session, and then rotation testing before and after completion of a single phase. So this is just some of the equipment I'm going to look at using for testing. So these are very familiar with the jump mats. We've all seen them or used them at some point just to track air time. And I'm going to have the athlete use both hands to jump just to keep it natural because I don't think snowboarders would jump with hands and hips. Rotational force. Initially, I thought of using just the Kaiser for both force and speed, but Kaiser units can only track power output. So that's why I thought of using at least a wall-mounted Tendo unit in order to track rotational speed in the athlete. So also another busy slide, I'm just going to jump straight into it. So just the general preparatory phase, the goal here is just to increase lean muscle mass and also develop some foundation of power. This is where the athlete uses all the big movements. As we can see here, sample exercises. We got the bench press, deadlift, front squat, clean poos, rows, core training. Core training, we're going to try and focus on rotational stuff. So we can do what we call windshield wipers, where you have your lower body up, legs up, and then just do windshield wiper motion, or at least Russian twist, weighted Russian twist to get, again, rotational component in there. Same sample, set to rep scheme. So GPP1, as you saw the first 4 weeks, is going to be at 5 sets, 6 to 8 reps at about 80-85% 1RM. And then GPP2 will be at 5 sets, 3 to 5 reps. Again, dropping the volume for a heavier load at above 85% 1RM. A little thing I want to touch on is one rep max testing will be done at the beginning of the off season, and then all throughout the phases. Usually, I want to try and do it at the end of SPP as we get into CPP, because that's going to be speed work. It's not going to be a lot of heavy lifting, and then finally once more at the end of the in season. So moving on to the SPP, specialized prep phase. This is where we transition more into power and speed, since we already have at least 8 weeks to develop our strength. Again, incorporation of impact training, as you saw in the annual plan. Taking into consideration that during practices, they're already landing, so just to keep in mind that I don't want to overload the athlete with impact stuff. Again, I talked about unilateral lands earlier, just to get more balanced development in the athlete's body. Some sample exercises include clean, back squat, rotational landmine stuff. Again, we've seen those here in the weight room. Something I think is very useful for the snowboard athlete. Some box drops for the impact, and trap bar jumps for power development. Again, sample set and rep scheme. 5 sets of 4 to 6 reps, 80% for SPP1. And SPP2 is 5 sets of 6 to 8 reps, 75% 1 rep. And the final phase, the competition prep phase. Again, emphasis on speed of movement. We're trying to take away any like crazy heavy loading and just emphasize the speed of rotation, speed of takeoff, and stuff like that. So some sample exercises: box jumps, rotational mat ball throws, body weight exercises, your push-ups, your pull-ups. Again, try not to heavy load them. And then pogo hops and Kaiser unit rotations, because Kaiser units we can adjust using air pressure. So the small increments is very useful to just get variation in force production. And finally, CPP would be 4 sets of 5 reps and again, 1% of 1 rep only where applicable, because we're not loading the athlete all that much. And then transitioning finally into preseason, in-season stuff. Because we're going into the competition phase, we want to try and taper off, not too much volume. And then we also have to take into consideration and increase practice sessions, again, not to overload the athlete, try and taper off. And then I really want to put some focus on the recovery phase, because when they're traveling, it's very easy for them to fall into fatigue, and often they neglect sleep and nutrition, so this is something I want to hammer home. We want to place more importance to sleep and nutrition as they travel along and compete around the world. And finally, maybe some implementation of meditation from yoga practices, or maybe even Tai Chi. They seem to have a very good program, and I think I want to read up more on that and just try and incorporate that into the program. All right, that's the end of it. Any questions, you can either email me, text me at my cell, or if you have any right now, just shoot.
Good. Any questions from anybody in here or online?
That was very dense. I could have gone into more detail, but it would have taken like probably 20-25 minutes. But again, any questions, feel free to just shout out.
Yeah, I got one, Russell.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned like in the start how looking at the sport, there's the triphasic element of muscle action, right? So the concentric, the isometric, the eccentric.
Yeah.
Do you think that that has a place in your program? Like, are you going to implement eccentric style training during blocks of your training? Are you going to implement isometric holds during blocks of your training? Or are you really just going to concentrate on like power development in terms of concentric stuff? So how does that play into your thought process?
The eccentric component, I believe, will come in hand when we do all the maximal heavy loading stuff, because again, they're trying to counteract the weight that gravity is pulling down when you're lifting heavy, so that's not going to be a problem. But the one thing I really want to actually focus on, as you mentioned earlier, is isometric holds, because a large part of their run is going from that flat surface and moving up to the ramp, so that's going to be an isometric hold. So yes, that's going to be a component I want to try and incorporate during the first 2 phases, at least GPP and SPP. Not really much in the CPP, that's where we really want to focus on speed. Yeah, Kobe, shoot.
Did you have any anti-rotation movements for core? Because they kind of went by fast. So I know you had the windshield wipers, which was rotation. Yep. So I was curious if you had like the opposite.
Actually, in the SPP one, I introduced more of like weighted rotational jumps, and just that movement alone, when they land, they have to again counteract the weight that's rotating with them. So that would count again toward that anti-rotational stuff. As well as they're also training a couple of days a week in the mountains, so that's again going to factor into the anti-rotational stuff they have to get down. Again, we're also looking at an elite athlete, so they're pretty used to the movements. It'll look a lot different if you're looking at, like, say, a beginner athlete where they have to learn how to rotate and land properly. So yeah. Good question. Thanks.
A question from Emily
Yeah.
online. She says, since the sport is on a board with your feet fixed inside a boot, is that changing any way that you train your athlete?
Thank you, Emily. Good question, first of all. In my mind, I don't think it's going to change a lot because even with their boots strapped in, the power development is going to be more or less the same. And because they're in a boot strapped in the board, that's why I started introducing unilateral stuff, because they're always on 2 feet, trying to land on 2 feet. Sometimes they may overcompensate on one or the other. That's why I want to try and introduce some unilateral stuff just to get more balance and development.
All right, well done. Thanks very much, Rob.
Just a little fun picture at the end. This is a Lego model of a snow groomer, because we always see the half pipe. We don't see how it's built. So this is what it looks like. Basically, it goes from the flat up the sides. It takes about 350 hours to complete the full half pipe. All right, thank you, everyone.
Very good.
Thank you.